Alright, so in this lesson we're going to do a couple things about integers and absolute value. So the first thing is we're going to graph those integers on a number line, and we're going to find the absolute value of an expression. So first thing, what is an integer? An integer is a positive or negative whole number. So it can't be a decimal, it has to be a rounded out number. So like 1, 2, 3, -1, -2, -3. 0 is an integer, but it's not positive or negative. But like I said, you can't have any decimals. Those are not integers, they're something entirely different. So that's what an integer is. And we're going to be dealing with a number line often in this. So here's our number line, and it's important to remember that everything on the right side is going to be positive. Oops. So everything to this side is going to be positive, and then everything on the left side of 0 is going to be negative. So you should be able to know what integers are on this number line without labeling it, but if we were to label it, it would go 0, 1, and count up like this, all the way to 8. And then on the left side, we're going to go negative. So it's going to count down, starting at -1, -2, -3, and so on to -8. So that's how your number line is going to look. It's going to go up from 0 and down to the negatives from 0. So we know what an integer is, we know what a number line is. Let's go on to what is a coordinate. A coordinate is the number that responds to a point on the number line. So if I say move to coordinate 3, what you'd be talking about is you go to the number 3 on your number line, and this would be coordinate 3. So the point that is on the number line. And then the next term that you're going to need to know is absolute value. So absolute value is the distance a number is from 0 on the number line. So what is the absolute value of 3? Well, what's the distance this coordinate is from the number 0? And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So the important thing to remember about absolute value is that it is always going to be a positive number. If you remember this, you're going to be in business. So absolute value is always going to be positive. So let's see what the heck absolute value is. So these little brackets here, that is what signifies absolute value. So this phrase is asking, what is the absolute value of -3? So we're going to look, here's our number line. I know it's going to count down -1, -2. Here's -3. Here's my coordinate. So what is the absolute value of this coordinate? Well, what's the distance it is from 0? So we could count. We can count backwards. 1, 2, 3. So it's 3 spots away from 0. So the absolute value of -3 is going to be 3. So let's look at another example. This is asking, what is the absolute value of +3? Well, on my number line, I know that 3 is going to be right here on the number line. Here's my coordinate. And it wants to know what's the absolute value of 3. So what's the distance it is from 0? 1, 2, 3. Again, it's 3 spots away from 0. So as you notice, it's always going to be positive because everything on the number line is a certain distance away from the number. So let's practice putting things on the number line. So we need the points F, U, and N on the number line. So the coordinate, so that just means the point on the number line. We want to know where that is. So F is going to be 7. So we're going to count from 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's my 7. Here's my coordinate. And it's asking me to label it. So I'm going to put that up above. That's going to be F. I'm going to move on to the next one. So it's asking U to be the coordinate -8. So I'm going to count from 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, -8. It's going to be down here. There's my coordinate. Notice I'm putting the point on the actual number line, not above it or below it, and I'm going to label that as U. So that was that coordinate. And then my last one is N, and that's going to be at 0. So that's easy. 0 is right here. That's my coordinate, and I'm going to label that as N. So that was this one. All right, so that's how we label. We've got absolute value, how to label it, and let's move on to the next page here. Let's scroll back up. And we're going to talk about solving these absolute values here. So write an integer for each step. So we remember an integer is just a whole number, positive or negative. So if we deposit something, think of your bank account. If you're putting money in, you're adding to your bank account. So this is going to be a positive 300. Now if a number is positive, you don't have to put that plus sign. I'm just showing you that it's a positive 300. A withdrawal, so think of your bank account again, you're taking money out, so that's going to be a negative 20. For negatives, you have to put that negative sign. 10 seconds before takeoff, so that means you would be counting down. So it would be a negative, oops. So when you're counting down, think of your numbers when you're counting down. You start at 10, so you're counting backwards. So it would be negative 10, like I said. 15 below 0, so if it's below 0, your temperature is in the negatives. You gained 25 yards, so positive, and you lose 5 pounds. So those are just representing your integers. And then here's our absolute value. Remember, those brackets are absolute values. So what is the absolute value of negative 12? Well, what's the distance from your number line? If you need to, you can draw your number line up here. Or you should know, well, negative 12, there's going to be 12 spots away from 0. So my answer is 12. How many spots is 0 away from 0? Well, that's easy enough. It's just 0 spots away. Then we get into more problems here where you have to add or subtract. So what I like to do is if it's a negative 9, absolute value of negative 9 is 9. It's 9 spots away from 0. And then what's the absolute value of 3? Well, it's 3 spots away. So I've simplified the absolute values, and what they want me to do is add them. So now I just have a simple expression, 9 plus 3 is 12. So make sure if you have 2 absolute value symbols, make sure you simplify that first before you add them up. Next one, this one's a little tricky because the only thing that's in the absolute value brackets is this 4. So I'm going to ignore this negative for right now. What's the absolute value of 4? Well, it's just 4. So this negative here, I'm going to add on to it because it wasn't part of the absolute value expression. So our rule of absolute value always being positive doesn't count if that negative is not part of the absolute value expression. So that's an exception to the rule. This one, we have negative 8 minus 2, absolute value. Solve those first. So the absolute value of negative 8 is 8 minus absolute value of 2 is 2. So now I can solve that, and my answer is going to be 6. And last one, same as the one above, you're going to solve that absolute value first. Absolute value of negative 16 is just 16. And then this is not part of the absolute value, so I'm going to add it to the end. And the last thing we're going to be doing is evaluating expressions, and evaluating just means you're going to be solving it the best you can, solving or simplifying. So it's telling me up here that the variable a is going to equal 3, and b is going to equal 2. So I'm going to replace those in here. So I have 8 minus the absolute value. I'm not going to write b anymore. I'm going to write what they want b to be. So that's going to be 2. So just like I did above, let's see if we can simplify anything. I can simplify the absolute value of 2 is 2. So I'm going to bring down everything else. So I have 8 minus 2 is 6. Same thing with this one. We're going to replace our values. So a is 3. So I'm going to write absolute value of 3 plus b is 2. So I'm going to write those out. Simplify what I can. Absolute value of 3 is 3. Bring down the 2, and my answer is 5. This right here is more of an enrichment for right now if you need an extra challenge. Otherwise, this is what we're going to be focusing on for the chapter.